Hi, I'm Neerja Singh, and we are on the K Talk about the education of future, not the future of education. Because no matter what planet humans inhabit or what skills we decide cyborgs will need, the context of the human existence will always be provided by philosophy, that is, metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. In other words, education in the core subjects. Now, education is central for politics, for existence of mankind, of a state, a community. It's important for those who lead as well as those who elect the leaders. In the current day and age, it has come to mean not just knowledge, but also skill sets and access to crucial information. And of course, it has always been seen as a means to employment. Thank you, everyone out there, for tuning in. I have to begin by a disclaimer and a claimer. I'm Neerja Singh, and first, the disclaimer: I'm not an expert. I don't think anyone today can claim to be one. Knowledge and awareness and the research, everything, science, everything is changing too fast, difficult to keep up. And second, the claimer: I'm very, 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 very curious. My training and work, they've been in the two fields of media and education. Now, when I was teaching actively, some things bothered me deeply. As teachers, we, believe it or not, barely had time to teach. Students lacked that sense of wonder. They were not inspired. Were you? The management and principals were caught up managing the expectations of the parents, who in turn were confused themselves. Now, when I turned a parent of professionally trained young adults, I would often hear them talk about how obsolete the knowledge they learned in their highly competitive schools was. And they were told, in fact, that you better forget what you learned in college once you come out into the workforce. It's always been an issue that what we learned in school and colleges ended up not being applicable in the real world. Now, today, and in the recent part as a professional, all of us, many of us, are surrounded by that cry that our graduates are unemployable. I'm not seeing anything new. In fact, the World Economic Forum says that just under 30% of companies believe they have the digital talent they require. In fact, a Wall Street Journal survey showed that 89% of executives struggle to find candidates with the right mix of soft skills, teamwork, communication, adaptability. In fact, right now, when I'm talking here to all of you, I have a surreal feeling. It's almost a deja vu moment. Let me explain. You would have heard about this book by Napoleon Hill called The Law of Success. I was in my 10th standard in the St. Francis Convent, Jhansi, when I read this book, and it spoke of a mastermind. It described how one person's thoughts could magnetize and draw similar thoughts from other minds, thus creating a master maze, a powerful conglomeration of similar thoughts. This book outlined how this amalgamation could then push events in the right direction for you. Now, what happened in India in 1984 when Rajiv Gandhi came to power after Indira Gandhi's assassination? He gave a clarion call to lift the nation out of poverty and backwardness. He was a computer buff. He opened up the country to computers and the 21st century. It was in 1990 that things began to change in India and economic liberalization happened. Now, since then, it has been more than 40 years. And what Napoleon Hill wrote in his book has literally come true. Literally. There are supercomputers, hubs, a digital net, a digital maze all around our beautiful earth. Just picture the globe with that net around it. There are other things that's happening. This is literally a mastermind. I'm communicating with you today. I'm exchanging thoughts with you. I'm speaking to you without seeing you face to face. That mastermind has come true today in the literal sense. Now, what else is happening in India? The new education policy is in town. It's a magnificent, magnificent piece of literature addressing most of the warts that I believed once existed in schools. I just mentioned them a while ago. Of course, there is criticism of the new education policy. There is a problem some states see with the three language formula. There is a silence around the legality of the RTE Act. Access to education is a big question in our country. It remains a big, big concern. But the new education policy is truly, truly transformational and promising when it comes to ending the culture of rote learning and percentage as the only metric of evaluation. Teachers have always been held to this percentage in terms of accountability. And who has held them to percentage? School, parents are employing the system that employs them. Now, this is because the document addresses why is it a transformational piece? It is because this document of the new education policy addresses the tragedy of the lack of fundamentals in our education system, and that is going to change. That is going to be one aspect of the future of education, the education of future. There will be liberation not only from the inward looking curriculum, hopefully, the NEP will also pull down, and our experience with the pandemic, it will pull down the rigid walls of what is known as the gated living, which happens in the schools also. And we'll all be put on the giant ship of a global community. We have been put. One more thing that's happening, which is going to affect the education of the future. Believe it or not, we are closer to immortality. Did you know that? There are the tech titans of the 21st century. Shockingly, they're not saying if, they're saying when. When are we going to be immortal? There is Tesla CEO Elon Musk. There is a PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel. There is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Sergey Brin and Larry of Google. They've all declared war on death by investing millions, millions in immortality research and anti-aging solutions. Now, if we become immortal, imagine what is going to do to the education of the future. We'll have to reorient and reboot and rethink. There is talk of genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, prevention or reversion of the aging of cells, replacement of vital body organs with new parts using the 3D organ printing technology. In fact, Dr. Ian Pearson, who's a futurist, he claims that people born after 1970, not me, after 1970, and many of you out there probably qualify, they should be able to, technically speaking, and if you can afford it, you should be able to live forever. In fact, there is talk of how the growing older is that phenomena is a disease that can be circumvented. Now, I don't know, you would have heard of Elon Musk's company called Neuralink. It is developing brain computer interfaces, BMI. These brain machine interfaces, they are a way to restore sensory and motor functions. That is going to affect the education of the future. There is senolytics, which is an evolving branch of anti-aging medicine, where focus is on developing a class of drugs that can destroy the aging cells. And there is a new and a bizarre concept, Witernity or virtual eternity. Its goal is to embrace digital existence after death. What they're talking about is scanning and copying of the human brain either before death or while it remains still fresh. Where is all this coming from? I'm not making it up. It's coming from the Global Future 2045 conference in New York City, where the Russian multimillionaire and former media mogul Dmitry Itskov, he in fact unveiled a timeline for achieving immortality and some of the key features that will affect the education of the future. I dare not say if it comes true. Man's landing on moon was considered a big if. There've been several ifs. So what is the timeline? 2025, it is 2020 right now, 2025, a robot body will be in a position to serve the frail human one as a life support system. In 2035, which is 15 years from now, we'll know the end of brains as we know them today. Our brains may become digital systems. 2045 is being touted as the date of singularity, when man and machine will have fully merged. Immortality achieved. In fact, the next phase in human technological evolution is being called neo-humanity. While this is happening on one end of the spectrum, the other end, I wouldn't say the other end, in fact, parallelly, the industry, businesses, they're going through a minor earthquake right now. Not because of Corona alone, that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to how the leadership skills and organizational capabilities that the changing environment now demands, those are changing, vastly different from the past. Look around us. Aren't we solving the problems on far more collaborative platforms than they've ever been solved in the past? Don't we see what has come to be known as digital adhocracy? What is digital adhocracy? It means anyone who is digitally connected can be out there and solve a problem. You don't have to be in line or in a position, or it doesn't have to be your job, defined job. There is a digital adhocracy out there. Individual initiative, therefore, has come to count much more, and employees across the board, they'll often need to make decisions themselves without going to the immediate boss. They will probably have to align themselves with the corporate strategy and culture on their own. Therefore, it doesn't make sense anymore to direct certain skills only at certain people or certain class or certain level in the hierarchy, let's say the executives. So, strategy development, financial analysis skills that were very high up there, they have become now on par with relational communication, or what are called affective skills, which are related to behaviors and attitudes down there, because suddenly the task has become, well, more democratic. The job at hand has become more democratic, and people who are responsible or who are accountable, that has also become more dispersed. So there is a new generation answer in town today, and it's called the Personal Learning Cloud, the PLC. It's a growing mix of online courses, social and interactive platforms, learning tools from both traditional institutions and the upstarts, the wannabes. And what are the expectations? That the PLC will fix three gaps that make the current leadership development disjointed. And what are these three gaps? Well, the first is motivation. There are organizations that invest in executive development for their own long-term good, but individuals participate to enhance their personal skills, advance their careers, and then they move on. What is the second gap? Skill dissonance. That's happening in multiple sectors. There's a mismatch between the skills that executive development programs build and those that companies required to thrive. And the third gap is in skills transfer. What happens? It's a rare talent to take what one has learned in the classroom and apply it to one's job. It doesn't happen with everybody. This is the third gap that the personal learning cloud has the potential to address. And how does it do it? It does it by redesigning these learning experiences, and we are already in the thick of it, many of us. You can select components from the PLC, you can tailor them to the needs and behaviors of individuals and teams. You can literally cherry pick. The personal learning cloud is flexible. It is immediately accessible at the click of a button. And employees can pick, students can pick skills in the context in which they will be using them. So there you are, education of the future. Welcome, my friends, to the new generation, 21st century form of on the job learning. Now, all that remains is the management of the emerging PLC for the good of both the company and the individual. There is a network learning infrastructure out there, and there is talk of the sun, which may be setting upon the standard classroom-based programs, not just for executive development, for several other forms of education at multiple levels. There used to be the previous generation where a pre-packaged one-size-fits-all material was made available. From there, we have moved now recently to a fast, low-cost corporate university, in-house learning programs, in the same way that platforms such as Facebook and Instagram facilitate the formation of discussion groups. And what is it called? Well, it's called the Petri dish learning. It fosters the rapid growth of learning communities. And one might ask, what are the components? The components are the massive open online courses, the MOOCs. There are platforms like Coursera, like edX, like Udemy, there are ecosystems, corporate training and development ecosystems from LinkedIn Learning. There is Skillsoft, and there is on-demand solution-centric approaches to leadership development from their companies like McKinsey Solutions. There is McKinsey Academy. And then there are the talent management platforms such as Smash, Fly, and Yellow. So what is the demand today? And for the future, it is for an education that is customizable. The word is customize. Customizable, trackable. You should be able to track it. And measurably effective. You should be able to measure the outcomes of this education. And what are the other demands? The demand is to connect learning needs and learner outcomes to recruitment, number one, retention, number two, and promotion decisions. The demand is to have prescriptions and proscriptions actionable every day. The demand is to make learning the same as doing. Whatever you learn, apply. Demand is to develop leaders with the skills to do the right thing at the right time, for the right reason, in the right way. That is a demand. That is a kind of education we will need in the immediate and the foreseeable future. Another interesting thing that's rapidly happening around is the integration of technology with education. Now, this integration is necessary to replace the traditional chalk and talk system, as we call it, where the teacher becomes a catalyst for higher learning. The role of a teacher is changing. Today, most schools understand, in fact, every school understands today, the need for augmenting teachers and physical resources with the digital ones. There are many schools that are moving towards whole-scale technology integration with the what is called the school ERP, the enterprise resource planning software systems, digital labs for subjects like maths and science. Digital literacy is it's not just the ability to operate a computer. No, no, no. Digital literacy is the confidence to take on an electronic interface, be it an app, a computer, a smartphone, or a tablet. Literacy is on the rise partly due to more intuitive interfaces and apps and the widespread availability around us of, let's say, examples are ATM or a ticket kiosk on the metro stations. These are all examples of a digital interface. The boarding passes that you issue yourself at an airport. So digital content and technology today is being customized very rapidly. A lot of private players now in this space, they're being customized to local languages so that students can absorb them with more strength. Students who are not comfortable in English, and that's a huge, huge segment in our country. The kind of given our diversity, given given our size, given the areas that need servicing. Now, this is reinforced using localized content. This is happening. There is attempt to use familiar surroundings. For example, apps and designs wherein you can switch languages, or you can switch the on-screen text, the entire lesson at the click of a button. These are available, and they are that this kind of content and interfaces are rapidly being put together. Over the next few years, digital technology is going to be definitely an integral part of schools. There is no debating that. In fact, so much so that it's no longer being spoken of as aspirational. We are working with the assumption that this is how it's going to be. And not just content, simulations, online experiments, hands-on activities. These are the next phase of digital learning. And again, they are there on the board. One more thing which is going to be used more and more in the education of future is the social media. It's going to play a bigger role in the time to come. Social media gives you a controlled environment, and it allows for the impact to be multifold many times over. Take gamification, for instance. Gamification, if viewed from a different perspective, it's a way to allow individual learning paths, instant feedback, motivation. It will give the player, it also increases the number of students a teacher can reach out to. The students' peer pressure, sorry, the not the peer pressure, peer pressure comes automatically with peer pressure. The group, the student group, their peer group can increase, and they have the opportunity also to learn from the best teachers, not just across their school, from across the world. So social media is going to play a role there. How helpful would you say, I would ask, how helpful would you say digital technology is in education when it comes to students and teachers with special needs? This is called assistive technology. Now, different students have different learning styles. Digital technologies can simplify things there. They can allow students with special abilities to increase the number of ways in which they can work on a particular topic. And additionally, the teacher can help a child work on a path that is different from what the other students are using. Again, the customizing that I talked about. So in future, we are going to see scenarios where students will access their schedule on their cell phones, learn via online simulations in schools, submit homework via their tablets, and log their computer access for integrating into the school reports. This is happening to an extent. It's going to become it's going to be spread more and more. It's going to be integrated better. Real world integration will also lead to tie-ins for vocational training and continual education. Now, let's talk about India in particular. There's been research. What are the attitudes of our people towards these changes? The education of the future. What do we think? What are our concerns? What are we most excited about? Now, it's very clear. It's becoming more and more clear that teaching will be less a vector of knowledge than a peer to peer learning. We talk about mentoring, reverse mentoring, peer mentoring. Now, Indians do believe, a research says that the role of teachers will remain critical. Apparently, as per the research, while Indians believe digitization is necessary, the importance of teachers is always going to be there, as well as the learning methods. So 55% of people who were surveyed felt that teachers will use new learning methodologies to help students acquire relational skills like creativity or leadership, teamwork, critical thinking. There is, has always been, there continues to be a very strong interest in social and cultural diversity in our country. And the emphasis on higher education for all. When you talk about higher education, 41% of Indians polled said that institutions must, above all, raise awareness against social inequality. And there's a difference here because in our country, inaccessibility of higher education is not so much about tuition cost than material conditions. Tuition costs in many of our institutions are not very high. The government institutions, they're not high. So it becomes more, the concern is more with the material conditions. 38% of those surveyed, they declared a need to improve living conditions, for example, housing, food, transportation. There is also concern about increasing the number and the value of the scholarships. Higher education is also expected in our country to play a role in preserving the environment. 58% felt that higher education can impact preservation of environment. In fact, there is expectation that the curriculum will be modified, as will be the programs. Do that more than finance dedicated projects to the environment, because that in the long run will be more productive, more sustainable. In fact, during the COVID 19 pandemic situation, the research says that Indians have reported a fairly positive impression of the impacts. They believe that the COVID 19 pandemic will impact delivery of higher education for years to come, number one. And there is an expectation, an estimate that there will be growth in disciplines like healthcare and social economics. These are the areas of focus in the education of future. And a huge percentage of those surveyed agree that teaching will be dispensed remotely, at least partially. That's a hybrid system that we talk about. Perhaps it will continue to be a feature now. Now, if you compare with other nationalities, Indians have overwhelmingly in this research voted for a complete shift towards remote learning. I'm not 100% certain what the thinking there is, but it is evident. And I know this from personally talking to friends that many of the young people now are not considering going abroad for studying. Until very recently, it was a big thing to go to Ivy League schools abroad. But that number has gone down. 87% of us Indians, we've had positive judgment of remote teaching during the lockdown. Now, like I said, less international admissions and ambitions, and Now it's time to talk about that's about India's specific sentiment towards education of the future. Now let's talk about what the future institutions, what are the areas that they will be focusing on or they ought to be focusing on, because the question that comes up repeatedly is, are the institutions, are the schools and the universities and the colleges, are they informed, are they in touch with what the students really need or what the students are coming to them for? And invariably the answer is mixed. Well, it is majorly no. So, what are the future institutions? What will they be doing? What will they need to be doing? Now, many of them will need to revamp perhaps their first year program to help the students build their passions and learn what they don't like sometimes, because students come to colleges with different expectations and those expectations are becoming more varied today, because those milestones that used to be uh, observed once upon a time, those milestones do not apply anymore. So perhaps a student is, um, perhaps a student doesn't want to spend 4 years doing an undergrad program. Maybe he might go to a boot camp to learn, let's say, coding. We keep seeing ads these days for young children to be learning to trained to be coders. It's a real possibility. So the programs, the content being offered, the structure, it all has to cater to the needs of the students. And students, they just want to come and build their passion for 1 year and they learn what they don't like. We want the structure and the discipline of an institution, because I realize that I need to know mathematics, because I need to uh, do, I have a passion for architecture, but I don't want to do the entire thing. I need to focus on this. I would like to do 1 year of this focused work on this particular subject. Institutions and organizations will have to learn to create pathways that will help the students to move through a clear, fixed set of learning experiences that result in the student's desired outcome, and make it as convenient as possible, because of lack of time with people, because of many a times how distracted they are. There is impatience because they are there's a waterfall of information people are struggling with, young people in particular. So make it convenient for them. Make your program as low risk as possible to encourage students to enroll and make the experiences in the program highly personal. And why should it be personal? So that it aligns with whatever reasons the students are attending colleges for. It used to be that students attended college because they were just expected to attend, they were told to attend. But gradually in the future, in the education of future, that will not be the case. There'll be a whole lot of personal choice involved, personal compulsions, personal motivations, personal desires, personal plans. Now, we do, for instance, let's say in the future, in the education of future, artificial intelligence, ethical hacking, cybersecurity, these are going to be the professions, the jobs of the future. And young people who are planning to enter these fields, they will cherry pick, they will decide how much time they need to spend and on what subject, because they are far more informed. There's so much information available out there. So there is a deja vu feeling. I started by saying that there's this surreal feeling that what I read in the book called The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill, it's actually come true. And that deja vu feeling comes back again as I get closer to ending what I have to share with you. I'm a speaker, and therefore I do use speaking as my themes for reference. And I'll have you know that if you were to attend any Josh talk today or any TED talk, you will always hear about the injustices people suffered, or there'll be talk of having been excluded, perhaps a feeling of being left out. That, I believe, is going to change in the future. I think the education of the future will be such that it will make the world a better place for most of us. That's going to change. And what will happen is, it's already happening, the middlemen will go. The middlemen. Earlier, if, for instance, I would take my example, I until some years ago, I would because my husband retired from the Air Force and we were moving because of his transfers. I would in every new place I would have to start from scratch. And if I went to meet somebody for a job, they would say, "What's your experience? How long are you going to be here?" And I couldn't answer any of those questions. And there was always this sense of kind of a misgiving. I felt on the back foot, almost a feeling of inferiority that I'm starting on the lower rung of negotiation because of all these limitations. But today it's very different. For the last about 10, 11 months, I've been able to get in touch with so many people because of technology. There is no middleman now. You can go directly, you can contact anyone. If they like your work, you're on. And this gig economy that entrepreneurs talk of, well, not in its entirety, but many aspects of the gig economy, the technology enabled work, the connections that is possible to form today, that has eased things for a lot of us because we've found our ways to express ourselves, to put our content out there, to find people who need us, to connect with people who we need, and build a mutually thriving community. That's also going to be, again, that is one thing that education of the future is going to capitalize on, and in fact will fuel, in fact will empower. So the middlemen will go. No gatekeepers at the door of opportunities. uh, Gatekeepers who will tell you, "Oh, come tomorrow, come later, come next month. We found a candidate." You send your application and then you check back with them. So there are no gatekeepers. The digital highway is quite democratic. Anyone who has the stamina and the desire to stay in the game, to last, the stage is yours. Hierarchy. You see, we see already in our daily life how the hierarchy has kind of been demolished, one stage after another. Of course, there is the other aspect of it, that grandparents today are not as not valued, but they used to be treasured for their knowledge. But today, a child doesn't need to go to grandma to ask what happens when water evaporates. They can just go online and check about condensation and evaporation and all the water cycle. But hierarchy, in many other ways, has taken away that repressive authority that humans had over each other. So this has been challenged because of the internet and the market. I believe in the future, with the education of the future, the market will be far more freer. Of course, there is talk about the prescription economy, or sorry, the prescription knowledge. You have to prescribe to get certain newspapers. It's not accessible to everyone. But I think with time, that will also go. So the market will be freer. I believe that people will be less vulnerable to manipulative leaders. We are seeing that already around us. In fact, the next generation, the Gen Z, what I call, they are social justice warriors. In the United States, when they saw their leaders were not doing anything, they just went on to Instagram and expressed their frustration, or expressed their, in some cases, disapproval and anger. We've had young people like Greta Thunberg who talk about the climate. They brought it to the notice of adults who are too busy um, going about their businesses. So there'll be greater transparency, like I said, less vulnerability to manipulative leaders, I believe. Uh, there'll be greater transparency and therefore less cynicism. I believe everyone will have a voice. I do appreciate that the situation or the scenario I'm painting is, well, perhaps idealistic, and it's not making allowance for the kind of power that that the internet technology companies exercise over this medium. But just the same, this is something by comparison. Now, education of the future, I believe, will also make the world, uh, let me say, of course, better for most people, but I do believe that we are moving towards what is what has been predicted in mythology, in our literature, in, well, Hindu literature. There's talk about the Satyug and the Kali Yuga and the Dwapar Yuga. I believe that we are moving towards the spiritual age. So 2025 has been spoken of as the year of the shift, and I do believe that we're seeing signs of that all around us. So, education must do what it was meant to do, and that was to create better lives for the most people. And I believe that the education of the future will do just that. The education of the future will create better lives for the most people. With that, I conclude my perspective on the education of the future. Thank you very much for listening. I hope there was some food for thought there, and amen to the education of the future. Thank you very much. Bye bye.